Welcome to the Quantum Lens podcast. I'm your host, Oksana Hansen. This is a space where science meets soul, a heart-centered, conscientious podcast designed to nurture your spiritual, emotional, and physical well-being. Through the wisdom of quantum biology, holistic healing, and a deep self-discovery, we'll explore what it truly means to live in alignment. If you're ready to open your heart, expand your mind, you're in the right place.
We're going to go just right back into it. I've only got 20 minutes remaining, I believe, so it's going to be, but I'm also speaking tomorrow morning, so this will be a continuation. Tomorrow's going to be all the health insights that come with this, which are summarized in I do a lot of hand drawings, but there's a lot of things that are easy to identify as nutrients and easy to identify as toxins in the context that we are souls first with physical bodies second, and all the physics that underlies that. But for the next 20 minutes, I took a bunch of notes while the other speakers were talking of things that I'm like, I think I got a pretty cool analogy or idea for what you're talking about here. So I'm going to reference some of those, but it's going to be like the fastest version of my unified world theory, spelled like a whirlpool, because this is the connective thread. And we'll start there, which is, I said it outside, but let's reintroduce the aether, everyone. It's been too long. It explains all electromagnetic and gravitational phenomena. It's quite simple. We can apply it. We can pull energy from it. We can use it to explain paradoxes in a way that are currently paradoxes. So let's remind ourselves of what this word and phenomenon is. So imagine there's a still pond. Still pond, not moving, nothing in it. It's just fluid. There's no bubbles, nothing. I drop a pebble. Pebble lands, emanates waves. Those waves emanate out. I have now caused motion in the still fluid. And if I'm over here and I pick up that motion, I can make guesses about the conditions when the pebble struck the pond based upon the wave I receive, okay? In this very simple analogy, the water, the still fluid, is the aether. The pebble is any action event, okay? This can be electric in nature. This can be physical, handing a wall in nature, but we'll come back to it in a minute. Because another thing we discussed that I will now step into is that we are in this field, we are of this field, we are woven of this field. What I mentioned outside is in a sentence, it's very simple. There's a soul outside of our body that emanates boundless energy. It strikes the soil of the earth and it's organized into the internally flowing soul inside of our body. That's our light body. That's primary, that's fundamental, that's step one. Everything else, the fire, the air, the water, the earth, is a crystallization of that process first existing. And I say this on a mathematical layer, on a physics layer, on a self-evident and observed layer, and on the resonant with our own human light body being that has grown a physical body layer as well. And once you apply that and you recognize that we are within this fluid, it's not that we're just in the pond, we are actually quilts woven within the pond, which is an important distinction. This is fluid, I spun it. As the whirlpool gets tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter, and I have some of these, I'll talk about giving them out tomorrow, but I have water bottles because it's super fun, and you can't study gravitation without studying world fields, which I'll get to in a second as well. But as the whirlpool gets tighter and tighter, it begins to look like a thread or a string or a flagellum, you name it. But I'll kind of pass these around so you can see. That's the string that weaves everything, okay? So we are quilts of light, okay? There's a luminous fluid thrown into whirlpools. Where those whirlpools get tighter and tighter, act like threads. When those threads meet and are pulled together, we now have material. Matter, individual protons, one knot in that string. If I were to make a circuit of sunlight and tie one knot, boom, I've got one proton. If I tie another knot, boom, two protons, helium. 3 knots, boom, lithium, beryllium, and so on. We can understand the periodic table, notably, one way to understand it, one lower dimensional model of a higher dimensional reality, is that the periodic table is also counting stepwise the number of knots in a primary solar ray or an etheric beam or a stellar emanation before it's contacted anything. So that which a star emits, model as a ray, tied in a string, one atom, and so on. We are then quilts formed of this process. That quilt is not static, is not still, it's gushing forth with energy. So it looks like my body's not moving, right? But obviously, I'm fluxing like crazy inside. If you could see my electrical field, my electrical circulation, I'm obviously doing this, right? It's just flying through at the speed of light. Everything's doing this. If you could see my water, my blood systems, my fluidic systems, you name it. We are not still. We look still. We snapshot and quantize the process, but we're not still. Everything is in double helix flux, and if that's contained, you got a still point at the center where those whirlpools meet. If it's not contained, you have emanation going that way. And so, again, I have 19, this is counting down, okay, 19 minutes and 35 seconds. This is me, a very reduced version of it all. I'm going to, I'll start over here. I'll start with some of the stuff that we discussed earlier and my takes on the situations, and then we'll get more into the health aspects tomorrow. But let's go back to the water bottle. This is still fluid, and I'm acting a force upon it and creating this lagging momentum now. I added a force, but it's still in flux, right? So it's still spinning, even though I added only just kind of this one instance. Something to keep in mind. Now, if you imagine I took sand particles, and I'll do this when we're more not on stage, as you can see. If I were to throw sand in here, and all the sand spread out, right? It starts to all spread to different directions, maybe settles in the bottom, some maybe floats, right? That sand is kind of separating from its neighbor and falling to the bottom. And then I look at it, and the sand is all scattered, right? We're kind of in the state of entropy, right? If I then take the vessel and spin it, what happens, observably, is the sand collects along the axis of the whirlpool on the bottom of the jar and begins to form sort of a pyramid shape on the bottom of the jar. So if I was looking at that, if I saw that there was sand scattered, and then a moment later, the sand started to collect and form a shape, and I was looking at that, and I didn't know there was water, right? And I didn't know there was a whirlpool, I might conclude that all those particles are being pulled together by themselves, right? Because I don't see the thing around it, and I don't see the whirlpools. But if you know there's a fluid, and you know there's a whirlpool, clearly, the reason the sand gathers is because of the conditions surrounding it. The motion conditions in the fluid surrounding. In this case, the water medium, but in electromagnetic phenomenon, in that case, the etheric medium, of which we'll come back to in a second. But an important analogy, and my belief of there's a material paradigm that we are kind of right now talking a little bit outside of, that has been sort of dominant for maybe a century. In the material paradigm, it is as if our scientists and our physicists and our medical establishment are inside a container full of fluid, okay, observing the effects of whirlpools, pondering them without knowing they're in a fluid, and without knowing the whirlpools are happening. And then we start to create physics from those observations. And what this turns into is a completely backward model of material physics that tries to, that it's full of paradoxes, and even in the best models, only tries to explain 5% of the universe that's called ordinary matter, and leaves to the heavy lifting word of dark to the other 95%. It's fluid. We're observing particles move around. We're trying to say, how does that particle over there, how is it affecting this particle over here? It appears and it observes. And to demonstrate how kind of backwards, we literally call that spooky, right? There's a spooky action happening between these two things, which is a whole nother aspect. Spooky action at a distance. However, if you don't know that you're in the fluid and you don't know the whirlpools, it does seem spooky because it's like, what's communicating between these two things? I agree with Nikola Tesla. I agree even with Einstein, even though you won't see these quotes. The quotes are important. All theories of Einstein and Nikola Tesla require the medium, the fluid, the superfluid, by which everything is connected, pervades time and space, and all matter is woven quilts of whirlpools within. And what this means is that gravitation, as one example, is acting evenly upon the sand, the whirlpool is introduced, and it looks as if the sand gathers to the middle. You can scale this up or scale this down. You can scale this down to the quantum. We need to introduce the word vortex and toroidal field back into our vocabulary. And the way that we do that is we observe it first. So this is a cylindrical bottle of water that I've spun, creating a whirlpool. But if I were then to pose the question, what is the shape of the water inside of it, right? The whirlpool is what we're seeing, but the water isn't really a whirlpool. The water is that which the whirlpool is composed of. The water is a torus, right? Kind of a weird torus, right? It's a torus that's bound to the sides of the cylindrical vessel, but it's a torus nonetheless. And as you saw from Sarah Pugh and the demonstrations, there was a lot of good things that were discussed already that gives me a lot of, I can skip some certain parts, but the toroidal field and the vortex is what all biology, all nature is doing. We don't look outside and see Minecraft world full of bricks and blocks and squares and cubes, even though that's where our mathematics currently is based upon. We look outside and we see vortexes, we see toroidal fields, and we see the crystallization of the vortices and of those toroidal fields. And thus, that's the biological crystalline, that's the material organism that has crystallized about the bounds of the light pattern. I'll save Mandelbrot for a second, but this is like my favorite topic, but it's probably gonna be a tomorrow topic because that's like a 10-hour topic if I had my way, but we'll come back to Mandelbrot in a second. I want to address the things that were said earlier because I think that would be a good use of my kind of 14 minutes for the moment because it's interesting. I gave the example of cube, square, and hexagon, and I'm gonna now apply it for a bunch of things, and we can then restructure our language and recognize when we're describing shadows of higher dimensional phenomena. One of those phenomena that's very popular is the word electron, right? An electron is like the square shadow of the cube phenomenon, okay? You have a whirling field, and if I freeze it, snapshot, okay? And I said, what are the conditions in this whirling field right now? I have now created an electron, okay? I have assigned a snapshot momentary frame to a thing that is fluxing at the speed of light, okay? We are bad at conceptualizing things fluxing at the speed of light, which is what all is, and thus it's very useful to create hypothetical particles that don't exist, but that are useful for maintaining a system because I'm stepping on squares, right? This is constructed, right? And so it's very useful that instead of saying all is a river of luminous fluid woven into lines, although that might be up here and true, I can also discuss particles and I can build tables, right? And that's useful. And so electrons like that are a useful form, but they should not be confused with the phenomenon they're describing. And so a good example of that is if I spin a vortex, an electron is like the vertex, or an electron is like describing the entire vortex by the conditions at the vertice, okay? So an electron's like the vertex of the vortex trying to sum the whole vortex. And that misses a lot of things. It's useful, it's a very useful model, but it's important that you recognize it's a model, right? The square shadow is not the cube, but it is useful to study squares and hexagons in architecture and to build buildings, as an example. Anything that really ends in on, any particle, falls into the same category. There's a fluxing field at the speed of light, quantized, particleized. We do that, the human observer, we do that to create systems that are locked in time. We hold the fourth dimension still so we can observe it in a three-dimensional frame. And because I said the word, I'll also offer my thoughts. I don't think the fourth dimension's time. I think, as Einstein famously said, I think it's motion, and time is thus a quantization of the motion. So if everything's in motion, and I now assign steps to it, and this motion was going on, I'm running here, stop, right? And then again, and I'm moving, it looks like a step of time. But there's a fluxing field, and those are freeze points along it. It's a quick tangent because I said the word fourth dimension, which we'll definitely come back to tomorrow, because the fourth dimension, this is a three-dimensional jar of water, and it's now, I've invoked the fourth dimension of motion. So we are now observing a fourth dimensional shape, which is the golden ratio, is the link between all of this, as we discussed. The shape of an atom, I believe, to also be the shape of atom and astrum and atum. And all of these words that I'm using are the same core geometry, which is that of a three-dimensional shape divided by the golden ratio, or pulled through a golden vortex at the center. And what I mostly geek out about math. I won't get into really many math today because it's not a 10-minute conversation. But if the only math thing I'll say, because the word golden ratio was referenced earlier today, is if I had a cube and I note inside of this cube as I've drawn here, two horn toruses. A horn torus is a torus where the axis is the minimal size. You could call it 0, but it's actually the Planck length, which we can come back to tomorrow. But inside the cube, if I have two toruses, like I've been doing, the volume of the double horn torus inside the cube is exactly equal to the cube's volume divided by 5. So said simply, the cube's volume is 1. I divide the number 1 by the number 1.6180, I create 0.618 dot. The volume, that number is the volume of the double horn torus. Same exact thing for surface area. If the surface area of the cube was 6 sides of 1, I divide it by 5. I create exactly the surface area of the internal double horn torus. I believe this is the base fundamental geometry of an atom, specifically a hydrogen atom, 1 knot, 1 gyroscope. I'll do gyroscopes tomorrow, but gyroscopes are crazy important, and planes of inertia we'll come back to. But this is another model of how we can observe the golden ratio in nature. All things can be understood as it's a cube. The cube compressed into a singularity creates a whirling condition, where if I were to then drop a particle, it would go up and around and down and over and up and around and down and over and up and around and down and over, and it would create what looks like this kind of AE symbol. Also, not a 9-minute conversation, but we'll come to that one. Okay, actually, everything else as an aside, I haven't mentioned very explicitly yet. Water's photoelectric, super important for us to really get behind this observed reality. Photoelectric means something intakes photons or hypothetical particles of light and generates electrical fields, okay? The Einstein Nobel Prize was saying metal is photoelectric. And if metal is exposed to light, you create an electrical field. Yes, true. However, we are mostly water, and what we have missed and what connects, I think, biology, did it fall? Are you still hearing me? Oh, okay, cool. I think it fell on my head, but let's see. Okay, 8 minutes. Is that water intakes light and creates electrical fields, period, stop. That is the first step of photosynthesis. That's what biology is doing. The chlorophyll molecule, because when the word I haven't said photosynthesis yet. I'll say it now. Humans are photosynthetic people. Animals are photosynthetic people. All biology is photosynthetic. One step back, because water is photoelectric, okay? Water intakes stellar emanated energy, and it captures these arrows, twists them, circuits them. That which flows is an electrical current. I would say they're absolutely synonyms. They are ionic beams bound into a current. I don't know if, there we go. And so we are photoelectric beings. Photosynthesis is secondary. We are photosynthetic, absolutely. But we are first and foremost photoelectric. As I was saying outside, if I had a still container of water, say a pot on a stove, and I just put it on the stove and I started to turn the stove up and I look in the pot, at first what I see is a still field. Nothing's happening. As the pot heats up, I start to see bubbles form, okay? The moment that first bubble is formed is when the material paradigm goes, aha, ordinary matter. Everything else before that was dark, and now we have ordinary matter. But that bubble, okay, is different than the water, all right? There was H2O liquid in this water. It got hotter, it started to move faster. It got hotter, it started to move faster. And then you see a bubble form. That bubble is different than liquid H2O, right? And now what I'm citing, as we all have come to love, is Dr. Pollack's work, which is that bubble, the properties of that bubble are absolutely fundamental for us to have a conversation about. And here's the super short version. Here's the 6-minute 50 version, is that the bubble's shell is a negatively charged H3O2 membrane that's like a gelatinous substance, okay? We talked about it, but a thin layer of it. It's the shell of a bubble, okay? Negatively charged. Inside that bubble is positively charged H+ ions, okay? So outside the bubble, negative shell of hexagonal H3O2. Inside, you got this gaseous H+ that's also synonymous to positive electricity. By heating up the water and observing it, that bubble is a crystallization of charge separation, okay? So the water intook radiant energy in the infrared portion of the etheric spectrum, or the electromagnetic radiation spectrum, or the octaves of aether, which I'll also come back to tomorrow. That bubble is an instance of negative charge, positive charge. And in that moment, as we discussed, that is synonymous to a battery, right? We intook energy, we had a separation of charge. Those bubbles get bigger, they build up. We have more and more bubbles forming. This is a fundamental property of water, and I would dare say a fundamental property of biology, is that you can derive photoelectricity from water by observing bubbles. You can derive it by biological tubes and having the easy exclusion zone, gelatinous, fourth phase water build up around it. There's numerous ways. But it's important to like really just put our foot down, because it's like we're photosynthetic and we are observably chronically sunlight deprived, right? Just full stop. Like if we were chronically dehydrated and no one knew that water was a requirement, It's just like, it's like, foot down, we need to drink water, people. Drink water, you need to be hydrated, right? And that's sort of been like lost. And I think it's important that we like really just be very, very clear about that. The science is on our side. It's not like that needs to be a controversial take. It's like, all right, let's each spend 30 seconds and see you can create a photoelectric effect in water. Okay, go, boom, sunlight, boom, bubble, bum. Okay, like, but it's fundamental, because if I took a flower outside and I pulled it inside and it started to wither and wilt, and then I'm like, what drug does this flower need to grow properly? I'm like, I'm gonna crush up some aspirin. The flower didn't quite work. The flower, oh my God, it dropped a petal. Okay, now I need to get more intense with my drugs. Is it too much water? Is it too little water? Do I need to play music to it? What do I need to do? Like, I'm gonna inject the flower, right? It's like, whoa, obviously, the flower is out of its radiant environment, right? The radiant energy or light that the flower needs to grow, it's now chronically deficient. And it will wither, and it will wilt, and it will die. And that's what happens to human beings. It's like, okay, how, like, an aeon of human evolution came to this point of radiant homeostasis, and then in a tiny, tiny blip of moment of time, maybe 100 years or so, we just moved back inside, and now we're all like withering, wilting, and we're like, what drug do I need? What shot do I need? What do I need, right? And it's like, first, you need to be very clear with your being that you're a light body that has grown a physical body, and that light body derives its energy from radiant energy exposure. So you need to return to the light. You need to hydrate your water body, hydrate your etheric body, hydrate your aerial body with proper breathing and aerial techniques, as well as how to breathe properly. You need to hydrate your earth body, and you need to hydrate your fire body. And everything I just said right there, I will explain in full detail tomorrow as to how you can do those 5 things, because we haven't discussed how you hydrate your fire. That's not a sentence that exists, but you really need to hydrate your fire body and maintain motivation and engage with creative acts and physically engage with music and have love in relationships and so on. But we've forgotten this thing that's fundamental. Not only is it fundamental to our own health paradigm, but it's fundamental to how we as a species, as a civilization, generate energy to power everything that we see around us. That's not really a 2-minute conversation, but I'll give the minute version that I started outside. The sun's enough energy for everything we need, period, full stop. Yeah, right? I know. It's a spoiler alert, it always has been and it always will be. And when you focus it, these lenses, right? Also, you can, won't do that one. You can magnify that energy, and my face might become like interesting and big. I don't know. It's pretty funny looking. If you're one-on-one, it's really, really cool. But not only is that enough energy, you can use that energy to do basically anything you can imagine. Because if I said, okay, I have 1,360 watts per square meter of solar constant, which translates to 1 square meter of sunlight, generates a ton of wattage every second, I can use that to spin my axle if I want to, or I can also focus that into extreme points of focus, which is a double-edged sword. But let's talk about the good edge side of that, which is that you can then enact instantaneous phase change, which goes by many names, but you can create fusion, quite literally. Bombarding something with a very high enough amount of energy is synonymous to fusion. And you don't need a giant $2 billion machine to do so. In fact, optics are the missing lens, the link. The lens through which we see, the lens through which our body is. We are doing this. We are intaking our radiant environment. We are focusing it to points of extreme energy density, and we're using that to drive our motive form and our motive body. I didn't do all the demonstrations. I've got a lot of them. We can talk about them on the off hours. But just one quick example, because it's a fun one. I'll do it when we're closer. I take a purple amethyst. It's purple because of the atomic lattice, the atomic structure. I go like this with the lens, and then I show you a clear amethyst, okay? One example. We can get to a lot of examples, but I think it's important that we recognize that the very fundamental principles that drive biology are also the only thing that we need to drive our civilization as well. This has also been lost in the conversation. We took the soul out of science, which caused a whole number of issues. We said, if you want to talk about the circulating body of light inside of you that's fundamental, you can go over there. And if you want to talk about the material thing that we can look at a microscope and poke and prod, which is ironic because if you felt the light, you can poke and prod that. It's powerful. We say it's subtle and you can't measure it. You can measure it, you can melt stuff, you can fluidize stone and pour them into things and let it recrystallize and create big structures. But I've got 1 second, so I'm gonna read one poem, if that's all right. I have a book coming out Sunday called Light Bodies. Woo! So I'm just gonna read the last 1 minute of the book called The End. So here we are. Glowing pages, written word, text illumined, worlds turned. I caught a glimpse of oceans bright. I drew it down, my stone ignite. A girl still seeking and clear of heart, gaze resplendent, a luminous start. I caught a glance when eyes alight, my statue melted, my stone ignite. Sentience in everything, sensations pulse in chorded string. Senses pass the stream along to parse the spirit from the song. Rhythms of a soil earth, aerials upon the wind, babbles of a chatty spring, fires cackle and heavens ring. To warp and weave a thread so bright, a quilt constructed of beaming light. Tapestries in circulation, pinned to a cross, respiration. Anchors formed from holy earth, the light poured forth and circuits birthed. Alit anew these eyes of mine, a star in waking, our soul sublime. I speak no more, there is no need, source reminded, spirit freed. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Quantum Lens podcast. I hope this episode brought you insight, inspiration, and a deeper connection to your journey. If you've loved what you heard, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Let's keep this conversation going. And until next time, keep aligning, expanding, and embrace the magic of who you are.